Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Helen, and today I want to share 8 tips on how you can avoid sexual temptation before marriage. So in last week's video, I shared why as Christians we should wait until marriage. So I would encourage you to watch that video. I will link it below. But today I want to share 8 practical tips that will hopefully be of use. So my first tip is to avoid graphic images. So, I shared in last week's video that one of the reasons why we crave sex so much is because we are open to all these graphic images and content all the time. And I want to share 4 ways that you can hopefully avoid some of these images. So, the first thing that I would recommend is using 2 sites called IMDb and Does the Dog Die? So these 2 websites, which I will link below, basically give you the option to search the film or TV show that you want to watch. And it then goes into a bit of explanation about what the film or TV show is about. Especially Does the Dog Die? It actually lists all of the triggers that the film or TV show might have. So, for example, if it mentions nudity or sex, then you know to avoid that film or that TV show. Now, in terms of using your mobile phone, I would recommend using Safe Search on your phone, and this blurs out images and avoids you being able to access content that may be graphic. And so, there are 3 practical things that you can use on your phone or that you can use to search to make sure that you're making wise decisions about the content that you're viewing. I would also recommend, if you can, coming off platforms that show graphic images. So, for example, sometimes when I scroll on Facebook or Instagram, there are images on there which are quite graphic. And I scroll past them, as to be honest, most of the images are women in like lingerie and things like that. And as a woman, obviously that doesn't bother me. But if you're a man, that could be really triggering. And so I would recommend just being really sensible about what social media platforms you use. You can even apply certain types of searches on things like YouTube. You can change your settings, which means that you don't access certain kind of content. And so there are so many things you can do to make sure that the social media platforms are safe for you, and that they're not displaying images that you shouldn't be seeing. I would also recommend that if you know that in your day-to-day life you witness graphic images, for example, your route to work, you have to walk past Victoria's Secret, then maybe it's worth going a different route to work. Or maybe you could give your friend a call when you're passing that shop so that you're distracted. You know, we all will know the things that trigger us, and it's important to put things into place to try and avoid us being triggered by those graphic images. Tip number 2 is to choose your friends wisely. So, the majority of people that I speak to who are Christians, it's mainly men who I've spoken to, when they talk about their battle with pornography, often the reason why it started in the first place is because a friend showed them pornography. And so we need to be really sensible about what friends we're choosing to have in our lives. I know for me as a female, when I was at school, I had friends who would talk about men in very sexualized ways. And that certainly didn't help me avoid sexual temptation. And so, here are some practical tips that you can apply when it comes to choosing your friends wisely. So, first of all, you've got to be open to any type of friendship. You know, we can't be these types of people that avoid certain types of people because they may be bad for us. You know, that's not really how we're supposed to act as Christians. However, we do need to be sensible. And so I would recommend to be open to friendships, but to have the mindset of noticing behaviors that aren't good. For example, if you are at school or in university and you're in a friendship group with a bunch of guys or a bunch of girls, and you can tell that they're talking about the opposite sex in quite a derogatory way, then chances are that they are going to take you down a route that isn't good for you when it comes to sexual temptation. And so you need to be avoiding friendships like that. But you often won't know until you actually become friends with them. So just notice patterns and keep a sensible distance if you're noticing patterns which aren't good. The second thing is to make it clear from the very beginning that you're not interested in talking about those types of topics. So make them aware that you have a faith. Now, I am aware that younger people often will use that against you and will try and be dragging you into their way of life. Whereas I like to think for most mature adults, if they understand that their friend is a Christian and doesn't want to engage in those types of conversations, that they won't engage them in those conversations, but they won't know if you don't make it clear. Like if you're going along and laughing at the jokes that they make about women or about men, then obviously they don't know that you're someone who's trying to avoid sexual temptation. So you've got to make it really clear from the beginning that you have values that you're wanting to stick to, that you have a faith, and that you're trying to avoid those types of conversations or images. The third thing that I think is really important is to also make sure that your main friend, like your best bud, is a Christian, because they're often the person that you will turn to for wisdom and for advice and support. And if their values are completely against your values and they're getting themselves involved in sexual things that they shouldn't, that's not going to help you. You know, you want someone that you can turn to and talk to who actually understands and maybe even become your accountability partner. You support one another through your maybe battle with pornography, for example. Whereas if you've got a friend who just happily watches pornography and doesn't see it as being wrong, then they're not going to help you, are they? So you need to be sensible about who you pick as your closest friends and the people that you turn to for that advice. Moving on to tip number three, as I mentioned in tip two, is it's really important to have an accountability partner. Now, an accountability partner can make you feel like you're not in this by yourself, because they could be someone who maybe is going through similar, or most likely there's someone who's been through what you're going through and has overcome it, so they understand. Now, it's really important to make sure that your accountability partner is someone that you 100% trust, because you're going to be sharing really vulnerable things with them, and you want to make sure that they have your back, that they're not going to share it with anyone. And you also want to make sure that they're not being judgmental in that process too. So make sure that you pick a good person that you can rely on and that you can trust. So some of my pieces of advice around having an accountability partner is: one, choose a regular time every single week, or it even could be daily if you're really struggling, to give them a call, even for 5 minutes, and just have a chat. You know, you want to know that every single day, or once a week, or a few times a week, you've got someone that you can talk to about what you're going through. A few other pieces of advice here is to also provide each other access to your mobile searches. So I didn't realize this was a thing, to be honest, until a few years ago. But you can actually share what you're searching on your mobile or on other devices with a friend. And this is really helpful, because if you're typically someone who accesses pornography on your phone, your accountability partner will be able to see that you're accessing this, and hopefully that will be a motivation to not access pornography. And I know that it's not as easy as that, and that you will still slip up and make mistakes from time to time. We are human and we do make mistakes. However, having an accountability partner will hopefully help you avoid some of that temptation. And the third thing, just with regards to having an accountability partner, is to meet up and pray for one another, especially if this person is a Christian, which I would recommend they highly are. I would not have an accountability partner who wasn't a Christian. And so this means that you can then pray together, and really pray specifically into your unique struggle that maybe you're going through. And this is the benefit of having someone that you can continually turn to, because it makes you feel not so isolated, And it also makes you know that there's someone out there rooting for you who believes that you can overcome what you're struggling with. Tip number 4 is to set clear boundaries before you even start dating. So often when we do date, we're asking ourselves, how close can I get to the border, to the boundary before we cross it? And that is not the right question to ask. And often when you get into a relationship and it's new and it's passionate and it's exciting, often the first thought in your head isn't, oh, we should set some boundaries here. And so it's really important to have these boundaries in place before you even start dating anyone, because the boundaries aren't really there for that other person. They're there for you. Obviously, yes, you want to make sure that you're respecting the other person. But if two people go into a relationship having their own boundaries for themselves, then they're most likely going to hopefully stick to those boundaries rather than it just being, oh, it's for the other person. Because you often care more about things that impact you than you do things that impact other people. And I know that isn't exactly a godly way of living, but to be honest, it's human nature. And so here's a few pieces of advice with regards to boundaries. So as I mentioned, before you date someone, get those boundaries set up to honor yourself and God. Ask yourself what would be honoring to God, and discuss big topics, like maybe with a close friend, like, when should I start kissing this person? When is it appropriate to do this or to do that? Or is it even appropriate? Discuss that with a close friend before you even date, so you've got wisdom from someone else, and create a plan that you believe is actually manageable, that you can implement once you start dating. So I know for me that I did have a bunch of boundaries and plans in place before I even started dating my husband. And it was super helpful because it meant that I didn't want to cross them. And I was tempted to at times, but because I'd set the boundaries there, I knew that I wasn't going to cross them because I'd experienced it before and I didn't want to do it again. And I'm not saying that you need to experience mistakes to mean that you then avoid them another time, but as human beings, often we do need to sometimes make mistakes to understand the importance of changing it the next time round and doing something different the next time. So just make sure that you have at least some plan in place before you start dating, because once you start dating, the romance just goes all over the place. The chemicals are pumping through your body, and the last thing you're thinking about is boundaries. So just be mindful in having that planned before you start dating. Tip number 5 is to pray and ask God for guidance and help. So, as Christians, we have this amazing ability to pray and receive wisdom and guidance from God. Now, a few reasons why I believe that we should be praying about our struggles is, firstly, we can really go into the specifics of what we're going through with God because He already knows. We don't need to pretend, oh, yes, I never watch pornography. God knows that you do. Or I never struggle with masturbation. God knows that you do. And God isn't there to judge you, He wants to heal you. And so we need to be praying specifically into the unique struggles that we have. There's no need to be embarrassed. God knows it all anyway. I would also recommend setting up daily prayer times, because we need to realize that we will face temptation every single day. And so I would recommend every morning before you leave the house, asking God to protect you from temptation that may come your way. And that doesn't mean that you will never ever face temptation again, but hopefully it will mean that you have the mindset of God rather than trying to go into it and just face it yourself. One thing as well that I would recommend is also to pray for your accountability partner. They need prayer. It's not just you who are struggling with this. So if you know someone who's going through similar, pray for them. They need just as much support and prayer as you do. And finally, something that I would really recommend, which I didn't do and I wish I would have done, is pray for my future spouse and for their purity. And the reason why this is important is because when you start thinking ahead about marriage and about who you will end up with one day, it helps you stay clear of potential temptation because you know that you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for someone else. And you also want to be praying for their purity as well. I know that you don't know who they are yet, but God does. And so just make sure that you're praying into that and praying for future protection on your relationship whenever that relationship may come. Tip number 6 is to speak to your pastor. So chances are that your pastor has either maybe gone through something similar themselves, or they've actually mentored and supported people who are experiencing what you're experiencing. So they will know more wisdom and have more experience on this topic than you do. And here's a few things that hopefully a pastor will do that will help you on this journey. So, firstly, they can provide resources that hopefully will be able to help you. So they may know certain websites, certain books, sermons, things that may be of use to you, and you want to really take as much of their advice and wisdom and resources that they provide as possible, because hopefully it will help. They can also intercede and pray on your behalf, which is really important. And also, when you do enter into a relationship, they will know that maybe you need extra support. So if you go to church and you have shared with them that you struggle with pornography and they've helped you with that, if you then start dating someone, then they probably will know that this is an area that of weakness for you and they will want to support and help you through that. Whereas if they don't know any of your struggles, then they're probably not going to be aware and they won't know maybe that you need extra support and help. So speak to your pastor, obviously a trusted one. And I would also advise that if you are a woman, to probably speak with another woman. I think that you need to make sure that you're being a bit wise and sensible there. Whereas if you're a man, obviously speak to a man in the church. And a piece of advice, if you're a woman and your pastor at your church is male and you want wisdom and help, if you don't know any female that you can turn to, maybe go to your pastor, your male pastor, and say, is there a woman that I can speak to in the church that has wisdom on how to manage relationships and sexual struggles? I know that may seem a bit awkward to say, but hopefully they should be respectful and understanding if they're a pastor, and then they can put you in touch with someone that you can hopefully open up to a little bit more. Don't overshare if you don't feel comfortable, and just make sure that you are respectful of them as well, and make sure that you put things into place that are going to protect you and speak to the right people. It's really important to get guidance from people who are going to be advocating for you and supporting you rather than causing more trouble down the line. Tip number 7 is be aware what type of music you are listening to. So, like graphic images, music and lyrics has a way of often touching a deep part of us and influencing us in a way that can be really good or really unhelpful. And so, what I would advise actually is going on like the band website or just on Google and looking at what lyrics they sing about. Are those lyrics good lyrics, or are they sexualized lyrics? Because reading lyrics once and realizing, they talk about sex a lot, I'm not going to listen to them, isn't really going to cause temptation. Whereas not doing the research and just listening to the music daily without realizing probably is going to make a difference and potentially cause temptation. Um, just a bit of an example that I've actually gone through myself. So I love rock music. I absolutely love rock music, but I'm aware that a lot of rock music does have quite sexualized lyrics in. And I'd like to say that I'm perfect with this and I never listen to music that has topics of sex in. I've got to admit, sometimes I do. However, when I was single and dating, like basically before marriage, when I was maybe struggling, I was quite wise in making sure to listen to music that advocated good things. So, for example, I would maybe listen to Christian rock bands because they wouldn't be talking about sex, rather than other rock bands that I actually did quite like, but that did talk about sex quite often. So just do a little bit of research. Don't be consuming music that is really unhelpful, especially a lot of rap music out there uses words that are very derogatory towards women. And so if you're a man and you're listening to those lyrics, it's not going to be healthy for you. Like, I remember my husband telling me that he liked rap music, and he would show me some of the songs that he listened to, and I was actually really insulted by some of these lyrics. I'm like, they're calling women the B word, that's not a good thing. And he admitted that he was going to try and maybe not listen to those types of songs that he admitted that he maybe did in the past, but that now he was listening to rap music that wasn't so derogatory towards women. And so you do need to be careful that you're not consuming lyrics that are putting a certain kind of agenda or perspective that is against biblical teaching. Let's move on to the final tip. So, tip number 8 is to find unique solutions that work for you. So, everyone is different. Everyone deals with temptations in different ways. And I'll give you a bit of a personal example. So, when I was struggling with temptation when I was single, it often would happen when I was bored. So if I was at home and I was just really bored, then my mind would start going all over the place and I would start thinking thoughts that weren't healthy. And so I created a bit of a plan, a bit of a formula of what to do in those situations. So if I started to get those thoughts and feelings, I would leave the house, listen to some music, some good music, and go on a walk. Or I would put a TV show on that I knew was good and didn't have any sex scenes in, for example. Or I would call a friend or a family member just to have a chat. And one thing that I often say to people is that, like anyone with an addiction, you're gonna have mistakes. If someone goes to like Alcohol's Anonymous, chances are they will always come back from time to time and say, I messed up, I had a drink. And the people there don't judge them. They actually say that that is actually normal and that they expect that to happen. And the same is true of any addiction, including addictions to things like pornography or even just sexual thoughts. You don't have to actively be doing something for it to be sinful. But we need to be aware that even with all these formulas that we set in place, that we will still mess up from time to time. But what you will hopefully notice if you implement these tips I've shared today is that you start messing up less and less, that you start giving into temptation less and less. And I do want to just end this video by saying that sadly the world that we live in is just promoting and advertising sex all the time on TV, in films, whether we're listening to a song or there's, like an advert or something on YouTube, even like some of the adverts on YouTube can be quite graphic. And we need to be aware that because we are living in this world, that it is very difficult to avoid all of this temptation and that there will be times where our mind does slip, but that God is forgiving and that He heals. And I will be sharing more about that next week in my experience, in my journey that I went through. So I hope that you found these practical tips really helpful. I actually am going to put a PDF version of these tips in the description box below so that you can go back to them and get some advice and some support. I want to do everything I can to help you guys fight temptation because honestly, it crippled me. It did for so many years, and I don't want anyone to go through that. So I hope that the last 2 videos have been helpful in this series all about sex. And in next week, I'll be sharing a little bit more about my journey. So I'd love to have you guys join me for that video, and I will be going into a bit more detail, a bit more personal detail. I'm feeling a bit nervous about it, but I want to share it to help you. So thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.